Okay, let's unpack this. We're
Yeah.
starting with a premise that is both simple and, frankly, terrifying for many committed partners.
Hmm.
The urge toward infidelity, or even just the desire for someone else, lives and thrives in silence.
Right. It is actively fueled by secrets, by that deep, uncomfortable space where couples just pretend that everything in the relationship is perfectly fine.
Today, we are taking a deep dive into sources that directly confront this reality. We're looking at an analytical framework for what the sources call radical honesty,
Hmm.
examining a specific roadmap for couples who want to replace denial with direct, and I imagine, monumentally uncomfortable communication about their deepest temptations.
That's the core mission, really. Our goal here is absolutely not to judge the existence of these
Of
desires.
course not.
They are, a biological and psychological reality for many people in long-term relationships. Instead, we are analyzing a systematic five-step method for confronting those temptations directly with your partner. The material pushes us beyond whispering secrets and forces us to look at a structured approach to emotional truth-telling.
And the goal is to make the relationship itself the strongest antidote to temptation.
Exactly.
And when we say radical honesty, we really mean it. This dive is about examining a structured way for couples to talk about topics usually deemed completely taboo.
Completely off limits.
Things like acknowledging out loud that you feel a powerful pull toward another life or another person.
Yeah. And that requires a massive amount of faith in the existing strength and resilience of your partnership.
A huge amount.
Precisely.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You are doing important work.
So to even begin this kind of heavy discussion, talking about the urge to cheat, the sources insist on a prerequisite, and it's non-negotiable.
Okay, what is it?
A history of consistent, open communication built over many years. This is not a discussion you can successfully have if your relationship culture has, always been superficial. That makes total sense. You can't just drop a truth bomb like, "I'm tempted by my colleague," into a relationship where you've spent 5 years arguing over who cleans the dishes.
Exactly. The foundation has to be solid.
Right.
The source material notes that many couples avoid discussing any difficult temptations entirely.
They just deny it.
They deny their existence until the moment they file for divorce, and by then, it's just too late. The whole point of building that historical closeness is to make these difficult topics normal for discussion.
So nothing is off limits.
It demonstrates that truly no topic is off limits. If you've spent years sharing your insecurities, your financial fears, your health concerns, and your small daily frustrations without being judged,
Then the big stuff becomes possible.
then the big vulnerability becomes possible.
Right, exactly. I see the logic, but what does that consistent open communication actually look like, day to day? Because that standard sounds monumental to achieve.
Well, it means moving past just communicating about logistics, like who picks up the kids. Right. The business of the relationship.
It's about communicating consistently about your inner emotional landscape. So it's the difference between saying, "I'm stressed," and explaining, "I'm feeling stressed because I feel unseen at work, and that lack of external validation is making me feel resentful when I come home."
So it's about revealing the why behind the feeling.
Regularly. You have to
Yeah.
reveal that underlying why regularly. That builds the emotional muscle required for the truly difficult topics later on.
Okay, so what if you've been avoiding that deeper talk for years? Does the source material suggest you're just out of luck?
No, not at all. Actually, it offers some really powerful encouragement. It emphasizes that while long history helps, today is the day you can start.
I like that.
It's an invitation to shift your relational culture immediately. So you, the listener, you have the power to initiate that change and start that process of vulnerability.
And move the relationship away from secrecy?
Right, away from the secrecy that fuels infidelity. But you have to recognize that if you haven't built the foundation, the path will be much steeper. It'll require even more effort to establish that immediate safe space.
So we've established the high bar of communication required. But even with that foundation, you still need to know what you're actually communicating about.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at what the sources say is driving these urges, because they dive deep into the main differences between men's and women's motives for desiring infidelity.
And what's so fascinating here is that the source provides these really clear definitions for what each gender is typically craving when the urge strikes.
So the motives are fundamentally different.
They're distinct, and therefore they require distinct solutions. For women, the desire often revolves around recapturing an emotional state. So craving love, romance, the thrill of passion.
That's a key distinction because it suggests the temptation is less about a simple physical act
Right.
and more about recapturing a feeling or, I don't know, a desired stage of life.
Precisely. A woman might fantasize about divorce, not necessarily to be alone, but specifically so she can feel the excitement of falling in love again, maybe remarrying or even having another child.
Wow.
The sources detail the psychological mechanism where some women continuously seek flaws in their current partner. They call it the internal justification system.
So they're building a case.
They're building a case. They create a narrative that makes stepping out feel less like a betrayal and more like a justified escape from an already flawed situation.
It allows them to feel like the victim rather than feeling guilty.
Exactly. It externalizes the blame. Now, contrast that with the male primary desire, as laid out in the source material.
Which is?
Primarily, men desire sex with a young, attractive woman. It's described as often being non-relational, seeking novelty, youth, and variety.
That sounds much more direct, purely physical.
It is in the source's analysis, and this leads to the critical "so what" part.
Okay.
Understanding this distinction is the necessary first step before you even move into dialogue.
Because you could be solving the wrong problem.
You're solving the wrong problem. If a man approaches his partner saying, "I'm tempted," but she, assuming his motivation is like hers, starts desperately trying to be more romantic or emotionally validating,
It's not going to work.
it won't work. Because if the core need for her is romance, and for him it is novelty and physical attraction, addressing the emotional labor won't necessarily satisfy his specific physical appetite,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
It's about isolating the true hunger.
It's realizing the relationship is often failing to meet two completely different core needs. If the woman craves romance, it might indicate a lack of dedicated, focused attention. If the man craves youth and variety, well, that often reveals an unaddressed need for external validation or a biological drive that has to be managed through other means. It doesn't necessarily indicate a failure of emotional connection within the marriage itself. So before we get to the conversation roadmap for managing an existing urge, the sources offer a really critical section on prevention.
Okay, so shifting the focus.
Shifting the focus entirely. How to avoid the urge to cheat by making better decisions before the marriage even begins.
And the key advice here is straightforward yet I feel like it's often ignored. Do not rush into early marriages.
Yes.
The recommendation is to date extensively, using that pre-commitment time not just for fun, but as a rigorous assessment period for yourself and your partner.
It's like dating to collect data. The sources are very clear that you have to thoroughly discuss and test interests, goals, values.
But it goes deeper than a checklist, right?
Oh, much deeper. You need to observe how your partner handles conflict, how they manage disappointment, what their reaction is when you tell them no.
That's a big one.
A huge one. You need to understand their financial temperament, their long-term health goals, and their ability to handle just boredom and routine.
So we're vetting for resilience and compatibility under pressure, not just compatibility at a dinner party.
Precisely. And if you realize this person is not the right fit for you on some crucial metric, the sources advise you to keep searching, even if it feels hard.
And the ultimate purpose of all this vetting isn't about finding a mythological perfect person, is it?
No, it's about achieving absolute personal clarity.
And what does that clarity buy you later in the marriage?
Certainty. It leads to certainty. Through genuine, tested experience in dating, you gain the confidence to understand exactly which temperament and personality suits you best.
Right.
And the outcome is a deep conviction that the person you chose is the perfect match for you.
So that gnawing desire to keep searching just goes away.
It disappears. That what-if factor is eliminated.
Okay, so now we arrive at the central strategy for when that what-if factor, or the desire itself, is already present in the relationship.
Right.
The sources say you need to learn to have a completely honest conversation to find out what cheating truly appeals to. This is the 5-step process for that difficult dialogue.
And again, we have to stress the prerequisite for the conversation itself. You have to plan this calmly in advance.
Not the heat of an argument.
Oh, never. Agree on a quiet, comfortable time, and you must jointly commit to avoiding taking offense or judging your partner's desires. And this is the hardest part.
I can imagine.
If the partner expressing the desire feels shame or immediate condemnation, they'll just retreat, and the whole exercise fails. It has to feel like a shared medical diagnosis, not an interrogation.
Okay, so if we successfully establish that safe, non-judgmental space,
Yeah.
let's look at the first 2 steps. They require mutual and I'd say painful disclosure. Step 1 is tell your partner what you want and why.
The sources give a really compelling example of a woman initiating this. She's aiming for maximum specificity. She might say something like, I feel that I never had my fill of dating.
Okay.
I got married very early,
Yeah.
and I have an unfulfilled need for long, romantic, teenage-like relationships. I crave the feeling of falling in love, of going on dates, to the movies. That is the experience I long for the most.
Wow, that's specific.
Yeah.
Takes a general complaint of I'm unhappy and turns it into an actionable desire. A need for romantic novelty. Then step 2 is the reciprocal action. Ask your partner, what is your need?
And here's where it gets really difficult. The source's example of the male response must be heard without judgment.
Okay, let's hear it.
He might say, I don't really want to fall in love again. I try to protect my mental peace. I don't want complications. What I really want is pure physical novelty with young women, maybe 20-year-olds, different ones, all kinds, blondes and brunettes.
Wait, okay. If the man explicitly says he wants young 20-year-olds, doesn't telling his partner this, even calmly, just create massive insecurity, not security?
A great question.
What does the source say about managing the hurt from that revelation?
The sources absolutely acknowledge the pain, but the principle is that the pain of the truth is ultimately less destructive than the corrosion of the secret.
Okay.
The goal of radical honesty is to make the desire visible, where it can be managed by the couple. If the man keeps that secret, the woman feels an amorphous threat. But once it's articulated, I crave novelty, the threat becomes a defined problem they can investigate together.
So the security comes from the process, not from the content itself.
Exactly. It's a huge leap of faith.
It is. So once both needs, however painful, are on the table, step 3 is introduced. Rate the desire on a scale from 1 to 10.
And this is the critical step of quantification. It's essentially psychological disarmament.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the purpose is to move the desire from an abstract, overwhelming catastrophe to a measurable frustration. If you can put a number on it, where 10 is immediate action and 1 is just a fleeting thought, you can gauge its intensity.
And its manageability.
And its manageability. So if the desire to go on romantic dates is an 8, that requires immediate, significant action. But if the man's desire for variety is only a 3,
You can work with that.
you can. The example provided shows the utility. He might rate it a 5 or sometimes just a 3 and decide, honestly, it is something I can live with. I can manage this frustration and the fact that I cannot have it.
It's like dragging it out into the light makes it less powerful.
Exactly. When a hidden desire is dragged into the light and assigned a number, it often feels much less potent than when it was a dark secret lurking in the shadows.
So this is the truly unique element, though, and where the sources make a fascinating turn. Step 4. Allow compensation through fantasies. This is a game changer because the source suggests the couple agrees that unfulfilled desires will be addressed entirely in the imagination.
This is the psychological pivot point of the entire framework. The agreement is legitimate, mutually sanctioned permission to indulge in fantasy. The source suggests that this act of mutually giving permission helps relieve underlying relational tension and frustration.
So we're talking about creating a safe, designated mental outlet.
Yes. And the reasoning is based on the idea of the forbidden fruit. By partially lifting the restriction by making the fantasy allowed, you strip the desire of its illicit power. When something is forbidden, it gains a psychological appeal far greater than its actual value.
So you take away the forbidden element.
And by making the fantasy acceptable and known to your partner, you're doing just that. Suddenly, the urge is just a thought, not a pending betrayal.
The moment the secret is gone, the neurological thrill of transgression just vanishes. It becomes sanctioned thought, which is infinitely less exciting than a hidden plot.
That's the theory.
But I have to ask, is there a line? Doesn't indulging in fantasy eventually make the desire stronger and more real?
The sources argue the opposite, provided the permission is mutual. The line is consent. As long as the desire stays contained within the imagination and that boundary is mutually agreed upon, it serves as a pressure valve. It allows the partner to experience the fleeting thrill of novelty without destroying the commitment. It is, in effect, an act of psychological disarmament within the marriage.
That makes the transition to the final step so important. Step 5. Discuss concrete actions to fulfill each other's needs. You move from the safety of imagination back into the reality of the partnership.
This is where you address the core need identified in steps 1 and 2, not the literal demand. So if the woman craves romance and the thrill of dating, the man might dedicate himself to planned, consistent date nights, romantic gestures, fulfilling the need for validation and excitement.
And if the man's core need is physical vitality and attraction.
Then the source suggests the woman might make an explicit effort to address the desire for youthfulness and vitality within the marriage, investing in her appearance and physical energy.
So it's an attempt to meet the psychological necessity, feeling attractive, feeling desired, feeling exciting, without resorting to the literal desire for another person.
Exactly. The couple cooperatively channels the energy of temptation back into the primary relationship.
Reviewing this entire framework, this deep dive, shows that confronting temptation requires a level of radical transparency that I think most people would consider impossible to maintain.
It's a very high bar.
It forces couples to discuss desires that feel shameful, complicated, and potentially devastating.
And the final synthesis is that this entire process is only possible because the emotional closeness we talked about in Section 1 is deployed in Sections 4 and 5.
It all comes back to that foundation.
It has to. These difficult, awkward, and potentially hurtful topics are turned from isolated sources of betrayal into cooperative problem-solving opportunities. It is about the partner saying, "My frustration is our problem, not just mine to manage secretly."
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, whether you are currently facing temptation or just trying to build a stronger foundation?
Well, the sources consistently suggest that the greatest power of temptation lies in secrecy. If that power is systematically removed by mutual consent, and that includes the agreement to allow compensation through fantasy, we have to ask, how much of the original explosive desire remains?
That's the real question.
And what does that remaining defying desire reveal about the true foundational needs within your relationship? It's profoundly worth considering the role the element of the forbidden plays in defining all of your most precious boundaries.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you want to overcome betrayal, break toxic cycles, take control of your relationship choices, read How to Deal with a Love Triangle. The link is below the video.